Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui. At the time that this podcast comes out, more than 65% of 2025 is over. We can all congratulate ourselves for making it this far in what is probably one of the weirdest and most challenging years we've ever had. And I say all the time, we're not the only humans who've ever lived through difficult times. But it doesn't make the unique challenges that we're facing in this particular moment any easier. We're headed into another very climatic period of 2025, and it's our second eclipse season of the year. And this is where the plot is going to get even thicker than it already has. The first eclipse season we had this year was in March, and when I was doing research for this podcast episode, I was looking back on what events in the world were happening last eclipse season. And there were so many news stories in our current events channel over in Patreon, because that's where we talk about this stuff. Eclipse seasons are genuinely exciting periods of time because there's just a lot going on, and a lot of it is significant, but it doesn't apply the same way to everyone. So it's helpful to know a bit about the eclipse season that you're walking into. Today on the podcast, the last eclipse season of 2025 and what it means for the collective. It's about to be eclipse season in a really transitional year. And if you remember previous eclipse seasons that we've had, and we get a couple every year, you know that these are usually strange periods of time. And the first eclipse season that we had back in March was incredibly eventful. It almost felt like we were in this little black hole of just like, what the hell is going on? It was one thing after another, and it felt like everything was coming from all directions, and it was very much a lot of unexpected and intense news. There's a lot of fear around eclipse seasons, and I understand why, because this is usually a time where the news is a lot. And news, of course, depicts things that are happening to real people. And, not all of the things on the news are impacting everyone in the same way. So we have to be careful about what we do with the information that we take in and make sure that we are staying informed, but not overwhelming ourselves with a bunch of things that are stressing us out that we may have very little that we can actually actively do ourselves. This is one of many reasons why I say all the time that it is very important to pick a lane or two of issues that are really important to you and just double down on those, because there's no way that any one person is going to be able to touch base on every single issue that we have in the world and do it well, to be honest. And it's better that we kind of focus our attention on the things that we are most passionate about and that really reflect the skills that we have. Eclipses are times where it is easy to get overwhelmed by the information that we're taking in an already emotionally intense year with a lot of events that are difficult to keep up with if you are trying to be somebody that's paying attention. A lot of that is intentional. Because if the people who have way too much power in our world, in our current systems, want to hold on to that power, it's better for them to be doing too many things for us to actually address well, especially since we are pretty disorganized collectively right now. That's not to say that the work that people are doing around organizing their communities isn't doing anything. It's just that a lot of us are still very disconnected, not plugged in, not taking action. Meanwhile, the people with the money and the power and influence are just tearing at the fabric of our systems to kind of hollow them out and use them for their own profits and use them to gain even more power over the rest of us. There are more of us than there are of these people. So if they overload the masses with a ton of shit that is stressful and overwhelming and makes their lives tangibly harder to live, then they get to sleep better at night as long as we don't do anything about it, right? And that's what they're banking on. Eclipses involve the moon and the sun and the nodes, which, if you don't know, involve calculations related to the planes where the sun and the moon overlap, which is what creates a new moon and a full moon. It's just the alignment in the sky. And so when the sun and the moon get in a certain place in the sky in relation to those nodes, close to those nodes, we have eclipses. We have lunar eclipses on full moons and solar eclipses on new moons. So the eclipses always have to do with the nodes. And if you'll remember from previous talks I've given, the nodes have to do with what we might call fated events. They're usually really significant in terms of timing. We often see these events happen in the world that really kind of direct the course of the future in a big way. And that all sounds very scary. But honestly, for the average person, this is really not something that we as regular people should be sitting at home and clutching our pearls about. Do these moments have impacts on the collective? Absolutely. It is difficult and sometimes stressful to watch a bunch of wild shit happen in the world, but the people that tend to be most impacted by eclipses are world leaders and people like CEOs, people with a lot of power and influence. And I want to remind us that each and every one of us has a lot of power, and we have the power of being in the majority, the regular folks, right? We're not the few at the top of the pyramid of our culture. So we kind of get the trickle down effects of what's happening to those people up top. Eclipses can also mark times where there are natural disasters and events like that. And so that might be more relevant to regular people in a particular place, or regular people might be impacted, let's say, if a president of their country is ousted. That could potentially cause political instability or relieve political instability depending on the situation. But those are some examples of how this energy can play out. Eclipses tend to be significant moments of alignment. You know, they are events where the sun and the moon and the earth are all aligning in a certain way to change our perspective on something. That is on an astronomical level. But on a symbolic level, I think that alignment element is still very relevant. These moments tell us where we are in time, and they kind of show us very plainly what the stakes are. And they can really shake things up. And so we need to remember that not all shakeups are bad things. Aha! Very important thing to remember, not only for this eclipse season, but honestly, all of Pluto and Aquarius. That's the next 19 years. So get good at anticipating weird but helpful surprises. Don't assume that all change is bad. Look at change as opportunities, especially in a world that needs a lot of change so that things get better. Even though eclipses can give us a lot of information, we need to remember that the events of the eclipse are not something that are like, an omen of how the future is going to play out necessarily. They really show us what the playing field is at that particular moment. Just a glimpse, even if we don't always get the full story, which I think for this lunar eclipse, I don't know that we're going to get the whole story. At least not right away. Eclipses come in pairs, so when I say an eclipse season, I'm referring to the time between two eclipses. The lunar eclipse, which is also a full moon, is on September 7th at 11:08 a.m. Pacific time, and it's at 15 degrees and 22 minutes of Pisces. Something important to know is that eclipses are not visible from everywhere on Earth. So if you do not live in the Asia-Pacific region, Africa, or Europe, this first lunar eclipse will not really be an eclipse for you. It will just be a very powerful full moon. A little less intense than the full-blown eclipse experience. Now, if you are in the line of fire for this eclipse, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have some important revelations around this full moon, but it may be that world events are more impactful in those places, and so that might relate to you personally in some way. It's just something to be mindful of during this time, and of course, as always, use your intuition and live your life. Be safe. In terms of world events for this lunation, I'm particularly looking at a few things. First, college administrations have really bent the knee for the Trump administration. A lot of that has to do with financing and the support that they get from the government. So we have seen a lot of just conservatism taking over institutions that are already pretty conservative. There could be more regarding that. I am also very much looking at immigrant detention centers and prisoners in general, but especially now with ICE ramping up. I am concerned that they could try to deport Kilmar Abrigo Garcia to Uganda, as they have said they intend to do. There are also intentions to build more of these detention facilities, so I think we could see some information come out around that. Another major concern I have for this eclipse season is public health. We are already in a massive COVID surge here in the United States, and we live in a very global world. You can hop on a plane from the United States and be all the way across the world in the span of a day, and you could take your COVID right with you. So these things don't stay contained for very long. I think that we are very likely to see another extreme increase in this area, and we could also see measles and other viruses pop up. I think it's been a little quiet about those things. I also think we could potentially be due for some more news about bird flu. It's been pretty quiet on that front, but I think it's because we have people like RFK Jr. making decisions that are based on nonsense instead of scientifically sound information, and he could be preventing this from spreading, but I don't think that that is being done, and that really worries me. I don't think that bird flu is at COVID level or will be during this eclipse season, but I think because nothing is really being done to mitigate the spread, that this could continue to be an issue down the line, and we could see something about that with this full moon. I'm also concerned that RFK Jr. and his people are going to attempt to ban access to the COVID vaccine, which is something that they have said that they want to do. And unfortunately, because people don't really seem to care about COVID anymore, and that demand has gone away. And by the way, that was something that happened during the Trump administration the first time, and then the Biden administration, and now with the Trump administration again. So it is really a bipartisan failure. And now we are in such a deeply anti-science, anti-vaccine space that I think that this has a real chance of going through and not having enough resistance to it. And we really need to not be complacent about this or about COVID or public health in general, because as of now, this is one of the most effective way for fascists to get rid of people that they consider undesirable. So actually taking COVID precautions is anti-fascist. you are stopping the spread of a deadly and disabling virus from entering your body. It reduces the amount if you breathe in the virus, so that's important too, because having less virus in your body is important if you do get COVID. And the more likely we are to get COVID, and especially if we don't have the vaccine, the more likely we are to end up in the hospital or develop long COVID. And these are very serious things. We are already hearing reports that emergency rooms are maxed out. Don't forget that the Trump administration has absolutely axed a bunch of access to healthcare, and hospitals and healthcare facilities are already struggling to meet demand. So think about how public health and taking care of your health when viruses and other things are spread through breathing in the air, how not caring about this is a collective issue. We are really in for some rude awakenings around public health and COVID because we can't see COVID with our eyes. So we like to pretend it's not really there. And the further we get down the line, the more and more consequences we are going to see. And we already see them. We have tons of research. Nothing I'm saying here on this astrology podcast is unsubstantiated by a shitload of research that I would love for you to go find, and I will hand you the links if you need them. Public health is failing, and RFK Jr. is leading the charge. So there's no better time than right now to start caring about this and taking this seriously, because it's only a matter of time before it impacts you personally. And let's try to avoid that, This full moon is not going to be good for public health. For this lunar eclipse, I'm also looking at Israel because, of course, and particularly their attempt to get cover for their ongoing genocide of Palestinians. I think there will be more major escalation and continued weaponization of the media, or attempts to do that. I can also see potential issues specifically around ambassadors or the friction within their government. Israel's starvation of people in Gaza is reaching a peak due to their blockade. They are not letting aid in, and it has had devastating consequences. And so I believe that we could see mass death from starvation around this eclipse. Now, what I want to say is that this could be stopped if the US wanted it to. The astrology isn't some curse that is going to befall these people. These are choices that are about to be made. The people involved in making these decisions have free will, as do the people resisting what is happening. We also have free will. Do I think it is likely that the United States or other countries are going to step in and stop this? No. But if serious and direct action was taken here by the people or by a government, it could make a difference. I do not want to be fatalistic when it comes to colonization and human lives. And we have to remember that free will is always a factor, and the future is a series of possibilities, and predictions are about likelihood and analysis. And that's what you're listening to now. You're listening to my analysis and my perspective on this astrology. I do think we will see resistance, and I hope it is successful. I think specifically that the people of Israel that are in opposition, particularly those that are really worried about the hostages and what an invasion might do to them or what starvation is doing to them, I think they are going to continue to be really loud. They're probably also going to face the repression of the Israeli government. So it is important that as much resistance as people around the world can do, as much direct action as they can take to stop this, it all counts. It's all really important, and it could save lives. Eclipse season rounds off with a partial solar eclipse, which is also a new moon, and it's happening on September 21st at 12:54 p.m. Pacific time, and it's at 29 degrees and 5 minutes of Virgo. This eclipse is only going to be visible in Antarctica. So if you are not a resident of Antarctica, you are just going to have a really juicy new moon. And remember, we just had the new moon in Virgo not too long ago. So this is also an interesting eclipse in that it pairs with that Virgo new moon at 0 degrees. It's like we're in this little portal between Virgo new moons, and then within that we get another portal that is eclipse season. So it's really interesting feeling energy. If you feel kind of weird or off over the course of these next few weeks, that would be very reasonable. But the best thing you can do is try to roll with it. Try to embrace the weirdness as much as possible. Again, it's Virgo season, a lot of self-care, a lot of organization in your life, and getting things done and making things just more appropriate for you really can be themes around this time, and particularly around this new moon. This new moon to me looks like there's the potential for more violent events in the world. And again, this doesn't mean everywhere, but I am, of course, looking at places that there is existing violence that could escalate. So that would be Israel and their potential expansion of their current encroachments on the West Bank and the invasion of Gaza, or more attacks on neighboring countries because they are trying to expand and create greater Israel. So they're already on the ground in a lot of places and have been causing a lot of destruction in this attempt. And I think we could see some really significant moves over the course of this eclipse season as a whole. With this new moon, I'm also thinking about Mossad, which, if you don't know, is Israel's intelligence agency that people have suggested may have had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Mossad is also known for literally terrorist attacks, like the recent pager explosions. They do things like that. And this chart, to me, suggests the potential for something like that. By contrast, there could also be a targeted attack in Israel. Back in March, there was a Druze Palestinian Israeli man who stabbed several people in a bus station in Haifa, and the media framed this as an act of terrorism. There's tons of articles still online that you go and look for information about this attack, and it is still framed as terrorism, though the family and the Druze community described him as having documented mental illness, and they believe that that was the reason for the attacks. But we really don't know. If we look at the Israeli media coverage of this event, what is the truth? It was certainly a helpful narrative for them to say that this happened and was an act of terrorism. So throughout this eclipse season, one thing that we really need to keep in mind is that we are in a moment where the truth and reality are not as clear as they always are. There is also a lot of censorship and active media manipulation on the part of the United States government, on the part of the Israeli government, on the part of many other governments and institutions. So as with all events this eclipse season, I do think it is particularly wise to not rush into information. Even if something seems really juicy, really interesting, this is a moment where I think it's beneficial to pause and wait for more information, or kind of trust your gut if you feel like maybe something is not quite right, or maybe there's information that is just not available right away. So give things a bit of a breather. It is also really helpful to approach this eclipse season as a whole by embracing the weird, embracing the intensity. And instead of running away from these things and letting them drain you of your energy, try to channel that into action. Be inspired to play some sort of active role in this current moment, because part of the illusion that we're wading through right now is whether or not we can even really impact these things. And let me just tell you that it is an illusion that we do not have an impact on the world around us. That would be pretty silly, right? If I could tell you all of this magic as possible, but then I was like, actually, you can have no real impact on these major world events. You can have an impact on the world around you. That is part of the magic of being a human being. So instead of running and hiding and saying, wow, what a wild time to be alive, and how am I going to get through this, and it's over, we're cooked, or whatever you want to say, this is a moment where you can lean in. You can create habits that are going to sustain you through this intense period of change, which is very important work. You can allow yourself to be weird, to be out of the box, because look around. Things are very messy. So, if you do something that's a little bit unusual, it's probably not going to make the evening news. You know what I mean? Let that inspire you. People probably have bigger issues than whatever you are doing and whatever you feel too afraid to do. They're not looking at you, more than likely. And if they are, wow, that's really sad. They have nothing better to do at one of the most exciting moments in human history. I want to really encourage you to wear a high quality mask. Wear a high quality respirator in public places. You cannot high vibe your way through respiratory viruses, especially not when they continue to kill and disable people or just land them in the hospital, which sucks too. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you care about the collective, protect yourself. Stop the spread by masking up, taking COVID tests, learning more about our public health situation, learning that you can spread COVID with no symptoms, actual medical research on what COVID is doing to our bodies, educating others. This is not about being cool. This is not about me telling you what to do. This is about you staying safe and maintaining your health in a moment where our healthcare system, especially in the United States, is rapidly declining, if not on the brink of legitimate failure in certain areas. I can say with confidence that you will be glad that you took precautions rather than fucking around and finding out on this one, because a lot of people have done it that way and they're trying to warn us not to do the same thing. With this eclipse season, understand that there are going to be some big world events. Some will probably be upsetting, but that does not mean we need to sit around and wait to feel like shit or lean into the anxieties of possibility. We have an eventful next several years, y'all. And part of what we are learning now is how to create new habits to sustain and ground us through instability in our world. We're learning how to trust in something bigger, whether that's a deity or the universe or your higher self or just you here and now. And before you tell me, Kaycee, I can't do this, I can't take it anymore, I want you to remember that you've been doing it, babe. You've been doing it. You are strong, you are courageous, you are a feeler of feelings, and hopefully you are someone who is dedicated to growing and learning and evolving through this time, because it is a spiritual time. We are fighting for the spiritual evolution of humanity. We are fighting so that Nazis don't get to claim the narrative of this time, because they won't if we work together and stop them. So we have to be in this process and trust that our beautiful spiritual selves are a part of birthing this new and better world into being. And that is a blessing. Think of yourself as a godmother of this earth and of our future. Take that role, that humble act of service to yourself and to the collective, seriously, because that's when things get really beautiful for you and for the rest of us too. There's more to say about the full moon and new moon that make up this upcoming eclipse season. I'll be talking about how you can channel this energy on a more personal level on the podcast in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. We also have Petty Astrology live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific on Twitch. That's where I can talk a lot more openly about current events, answer questions. If you can't make it to the live show, sponsors get the replay for every live and bonus episode that I do, and sponsorship starts at just $5 a month. So if you'd like to join, we are over at patreon.com/Kaycee Felton-Lui. The link is in the show notes. That's it for this week's episode. Tune in next week for even more Petty Astrology. This episode was written, edited, and produced by me, Kaycee Felton-Lui. The podcast art is by Max Swanson. The music is by Paul Schneider. This episode was brought to you by my sponsors over on Patreon.